Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you here again this year. Excited to be here with you once again. So I think that the first thing we might want to talk about is what determines the success of our industry and therefore our collective success as people who make applications. That success historically has been driven by growth, namely the growth of new value flowing into blockchains and blockchain applications. That is the primary determining factor of the success of our industry and most of your applications. It's that there's more value flowing into the industry and not enough applications or blockchains or block space or systems to properly handle servicing them. And therefore everyone experiences growth because the rate of growth from the value is greater than the rate at which we can service the value. So if you look at it that way, the fastest growing sector in the blockchain industry right now in the public blockchain industry is real world assets. Real world assets by the total amount of value in them have flipped DeFi. DeFi fluctuates between 90 to 120 billion, and tokenized real world assets fluctuates between 140 to 180 billion, depending on how you calculate it. But it's already larger than DeFi, and it's rapidly growing. The place where we all want to arrive at is all of the world's value and all of the world's valuable transactions and digital relationships in a tokenized on-chain smart contract powered form. Of all of that value that could go on chain, a very large percentage falls into the real world asset category. Personally, I believe that the real world asset category could eventually flip all of cryptocurrency value, such that the amount of value in real world assets that are tokenized on chain, just on public chains, not even counting private chains, will be larger than what is usually considered a cryptocurrency. This is simply because there's so much value that can be tokenized and the very, very, very small percentage that is currently tokenized. So how do we achieve all of this growth in our industry and therefore growth in the value that your applications can interact with? Well, our contribution to solving that problem is the solution to what's known as the Oracle problem. And the Oracle problem is a pretty expansive problem that goes well beyond data. The first place where people mainly know the Oracle problem from, bless you, is the data question. Right? How do you get data into applications without it being manipulated? So far, Chainlink has consistently powered the majority of DeFi because Chainlink networks, of which there are over 1,000 on production, are able to successfully avoid manipulation from things like flash loan attacks and other manipulations of that data. It's this avoidance of manipulations of that data, whether that's an exchange failure like FTX, whether that's a flash loan attack, whether that's congestion in the blockchain in which your application runs, all of those different things that could stop an application from being reliable and becoming an unreliable application is something that the Chainlink data networks have so far solved, both on the level of bad data sources like FTX, on the level of Ethereum congestion, which went up to 2,500 gas, where Chainlink Oracle networks continue to update, and on the level of various manipulations like flash loan attacks, which have not been affecting Chainlink networks while they have been affecting other oracles. The second problem is off-chain computation. How does the computation that your application need but blockchains can't do happen in a way that's trust minimized? If this is compromised but the data is secure, your application's compromised, it becomes an unreliable application. The third one is cross-chain connectivity. If the value within a cross-chain system is compromised, if that value goes away from your users because some cross-chain bridge got hacked because it turns out it's a 2 of 2 multi-sig instead of a decentralized whatever it is, then once again, unreliable application. Our goal in this industry should be to create highly reliable applications. If we want our industry to grow and we want all of this tokenized value to flow into our industry and into our applications need to be reliable. They need to be reliable in terms of how the code is written and audited. They need to be reliable in terms of how they interact with data. They need to be reliable in terms of how they interact with off-chain computations that can't be manipulated. They need to be reliable in terms of how they move value across chains. All of these 4 things need to be reliable. And it will also be great if the user experience and whole private key thing improved, but we don't solve that, so that's another talk. But the Oracle problem solves these 3 very important adjacent problems. This is basically what Chainlink does. The Chainlink ecosystem, the Chainlink set of protocols create all these different services, whether it's for market data, proof of reserves, identity, random numbers, automation, more advanced computations that are exclusively off-chain, or cross-chain communication. Chainlink right now is the only platform that has all of this in one system and where all of it can interoperate to create a safe, reliable application. That's what you can rely on us for. That's what we provide to the ecosystem. That's why we power the majority of DeFi. Right now, there's already independent analysis of various GitHubs that show that Chainlink services, all this large collection of services, is the most widely used resource across real-world asset GitHubs on various chains. So Chainlink really is kind of the tool set and the standard for how data, cross-chain connectivity, and various key off-chain computations, including AI computations, can interact with your smart contracts on various chains. That's our fundamental goal. That's the fundamental value we seek to provide. The other very big thing that's happening in the traditional world that's very relevant to the public blockchain world is that the value in all of those institutions is starting to go on-chain. And as that value goes on-chain, it will eventually flow to public chains. So it will start on private chains because that's the environment that people in the banking sector are able to use, but it will quickly flow to public chains. And in some cases, like with BlackRock and other asset managers, it has already flowed to public chains already today on production. So the TradFi capital markets world is something that can't be ignored. Our industry really doesn't grow the same way every time. It always grows differently. Historically, our industry has grown because there have been new markets with consumer retail demand that did not know about cryptocurrency. But if you look at the kind of penetration of many markets, including the United States and other emerging markets, you'll kind of see that pretty much almost everyone knows about cryptocurrency, and I think the numbers on the US were like 20% penetration in terms of people actually having it, and in other countries, it's higher. So the capital markets are the place where value will flow to take us past the $3, $4, $5 trillion market cap size on the public chain side. The question then is, how do these folks need to build their smart contracts, and how do your applications interrelate to their systems? The first answer to how they build their smart contracts is not that far from you folks, but they need much more data. So they require identity data, reference data, all kinds of data. For example, net asset value data for tokenized funds is a critical component of making tokenized funds work on chain. So they need more data. The second thing they need is getting that data and value across chains in a tightly coupled way that is secure. And the third thing they need is a way for all of that data and value to interact with their existing systems, because unlike you folks who began your entire life cycle and all of your code on blockchain systems, they began their life cycle 70 years ago on abacuses or something like that. So it's a lot of legacy stuff that they're not going to go throw away. The important takeaway for you folks is that all of this value, literally hundreds of trillions in value, is now getting integrated into blockchains. And I think the wise move is to find ways that your applications can interact with that value. Because even if the public chain cryptocurrency industry doubles in size to, let's say, 5 trillion or 7 trillion or 10 trillion or whatever size along those lines, that is still a very, very small percentage of the value that's going to be transferred from the capital markets, from the TradFi world, from places like BlackRock, into a tokenized on-chain smart contract-based form. And these folks, I can assure you, are in the process of integrating with blockchains in various ways. The whole BlackRock BUIDL thing is really just the very, 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 very early stages of the very beginning. So we are also at the intersection of this with CCIP, with the various data products, and our fundamental goal is to create a single data standard so that your applications can interact with their applications, and so that your value and assets can move to their chains and interact with their value and assets. In addition to creating the standard that right now powers the majority of DeFi, we're now on track to create that same standard or provide that same standard to the capital markets and TradFi, which is quite beneficial to them and also to you, because if you're on the same standard for how to define price and you're on the same standard with them on how to define connectivity, you can transact. right? That's kind of the fundamental goal. So if you're particularly interested in interacting with TradFi and capital markets, that's an additional kind of quality that you're going to find in the Chainlink set of services and ecosystems, and you're going to find that more and more of them in the capital markets world are basically saying, hey, I need a reliable source of data, I need a reliable shared price for us to transact. I need a reliable way for us to do delivery versus payment, for me to send you the asset, for you to send me the stablecoin from your application or your user. That's basically where everything is going, in my opinion, and it's why the Chainlink ecosystem and set of protocols is now starting to position itself as a group, and I think the whole community on our side also shares this view. So here's a good example in production today. As of last week, Fidelity International is putting NAV data on chain for a tokenized fund. So Fidelity International has a tokenized fund on production as of last week. And in order to make that tokenized fund work, it needs NAV data, net asset value data, without which the fund can't really operate properly. You need this information in order for people to be able to redeem, buy in, and interact with the fund. This is all happening on production. So just to highlight how clear this is, I understand that everybody has been hearing about blockchains and private chains and banks and all of these things going on chain for like the last decade. Believe me, I know I've been working with these folks for well over 7 years, and I've heard a lot of it too, but it's markedly different this time. Before, it was innovation people doing quote unquote experiments that they did press releases about. Now it is dedicated digital asset teams. There's a digital asset product manager. There's a digital asset engineer. There's a digital asset managing director. There's over 100 people in some teams in some of these places. So this is happening now, and this is live on production. So once again, I think the useful thing is to create great DeFi applications that appeal to the DeFi ecosystem and make the best, most secure, most reliable, most performant features possible. But I think you should leave a carve out or a place in your system where it can interact with the traditional markets in some way. Maybe against an identity standard or against a data standard or against a connectivity standard, but that should be a consideration because the amount of retail demand, I think, eventually will be dwarfed by the amount of capital markets TradFi demand. And that demand will want to use your applications and will want to interact with your user base. So you should, I'm not saying build it today, because I think in this room, everyone's primary goal is to capture the DeFi kind of public chain community, which is great, and that's a great way to build an application. And the other way to think about this is what's going to happen next, which is going to be trillions upon trillions from traditional markets. This is another example of our work with a big institution like DTCC, where they're putting, once again, NAV data on chain to enable fund tokenization. I think fund tokenization is one of the best, biggest trends in RWA. If I had to choose one trend in the real world asset space right now that's actually booming and going somewhere, it would be fund tokenization. So I'm just sharing this with all of you in the spirit of kind of collaboration, A, to offer kind of our help and see how we can collaborate and help build better applications together. But B, just to kind of say that there is going to be a big booming market for tokenized funds. And therefore there will be, I think, a pretty strong market for DeFi applications that interact with tokenized funds in useful ways. These are things to really seriously think about. You don't have to change your plans. You can capture DeFi land, no problem, but DeFi land is going to change if all of this value flows into it. And being prepared to interact with that value through something like CCIP, through the shared data standards that the capital markets are adopting, like our data feeds, proof of reserve, NAV data, and so on, is, in my opinion, a wise design decision. This is another example of an ETF that is using our proof of reserves to prove the amount of assets in the ETF. This is a Bitcoin ETF created by Cathy Wood's ARK fund, together with 21 shares. This is also live on production today. So these are things on production. The Fidelity International thing I showed you is on production. This is on production. These are not theories. These are not whiteboard exercises. These are not proof of concept presentations. These are production live systems. And they are gradually growing in the amount of value they hold and the amount of value that they're about. This is an example of a sell-side interaction with a buy-side token through CCIP using something called programmable token transfers, where the stable coin was wrapped in the programmable token transfers capability of CCIP to actually trigger the purchase of a token without the token's holder ever having to know anything about a chain. So one of the things that CCIP does is it wraps value and payments in instructions, and it allows those instructions to be executed on the target chain. Basically, what CCIP is doing here is greatly limiting the friction for value from a buyer blockchain in the form of like a bank private chain to interact with a seller blockchain, because the bank private chain doesn't need to figure out the seller blockchain. It can just interact with it through programmable token transfers. In some way, you can think of programmable token transfers as delivering on the programmable money idea, but across chains, right? So allowing a piece of value, like an asset or a payment, to have instructions around it, and then when it reaches its destination chain, those instructions get executed. These instructions could be basically the calling of any function, the buy function, the deposit function, whatever function. So now you have data and value tightly coupled, you have them moving together, and they're so tightly coupled in valuable ways that you can actually trigger events in other chains. This is an example of kind of the world we're going to, where the chain you're on isn't going to be as critical. What's going to be critical is the quality of your application, the performance of it, and its ability to interact with many different chains, many different smart contracts, many different sources of value and payment in an efficient, secure, simple way. And ideally, that efficient, secure, simple way is also the way your counterparty wants to interact, which, if we care about the cap markets TradFi world, will in all likelihood be CCIP from what we're seeing from the adoption from that market. So if you're choosing a cross-chain standard, if you're choosing a data standard, one consideration is what it does for you in DeFi. Another consideration is what does it do for you in TradFi? And then you can kind of make up your own thesis about TradFi, DeFi, what's the future, but you're probably gonna have to deal with TradFi, and then you're probably gonna have to adopt something in addition if you're not adopting CCIP or Chainlink or something, because that's becoming the prevalent standard across, it is the standard across DeFi, it's becoming the standard now across TradFi for data, and then cross-chain is getting worked on as well. This is our work with Swift. This is sort of relevant to you folks, but what it basically means is there's 11,000 banks in the Swift network. Let's imagine if all those banks go on chain. Think about how much money that is. Think about how much value just got on to blockchains. Think about how much value you can interact with. Think about the size of that market versus the size of some other market. That's all I'm really encouraging you to do. We are, once again, in the Chainlink community, thinking pretty deeply about how does the Oracle problem solve this data transfer issue and validation issue, this off-chain compute issue, and this cross-chain connectivity issue. The cross-chain connectivity issue then starts to extend into legacy system connectivity, right? Because the real point of cross-chain, the real point of all this connectivity is to connect the contract to valuable things. Basically, that's what Chainlink and the whole Chainlink community, I think, is thinking about and working on more and more, is what are the most valuable things that can get connected to your application? Is it a piece of data? Is it an identity system? Is it an AI model? Is it the private chain of a bank? Is it the existing backend of a bank so they can interact and send money to your applications? These are the problems we work on, and very excited to interact with everyone here at the conference, hear your feedback. I think our community really thrives on feedback from developers and how to make everything better so that the Chainlink protocol and the Chainlink standard can provide more of those valuable connections about all these different topics and let you build better applications. Because fundamentally, our industry is also only going to grow to the degree to which you are able to build useful applications. That's really the other big determining factor. The first factor is the growth of the market, and the second factor is what does the market find when it reaches this place? And you folks are the ones defining what they find. So we are more than happy to help you and hear your feedback and think about how can additional services and systems be integrated. So our fundamental goal at the end of the day in the Chainlink community at this point, in my opinion, is to create a global standard. So not just a standard for DeFi, which in many cases it already is, and not just a standard for capital markets, which in many cases it's now becoming, but a single standard across central banks, CSDs, large country exchanges, small exchanges, DeFi applications, everything, right? Just like on the internet, you have a set of standards like TCP/IP and others that allow value and information to flow across environments. That's the role that CCIP and the Chainlink ecosystem seeks to occupy. What this will do is it'll take the fragmented world of Web3, that's on Chainlink standards, and TradFi, which is on Chainlink standards, but separate from each other because of regulatory and legal concerns that are starting to fall away, and turn it into a single Internet of Contracts. So this single Internet of Contracts, I think, delivers on the long-term historical value proposition of our industry, which was that the whole world runs on blockchain technology. It wasn't that a small subset of the world somewhere over there runs on blockchain technology and the rest of the world runs on legacy traditional technology. That's not really what the idea was, at least when I got into the industry. The idea was, and I think still is, that the whole world runs on blockchain technology. And for the whole world to run on blockchain technology, there need to be many different blockchains, smart contract platforms. They need to be connected to each other. They need to be connected to various key pieces of data, identity systems, AI models, and all the other things that they need in order to become reliable, high-quality applications that not only reach parity with Web 2 systems, but surpass Web 2 systems. And I think that that is entirely possible, and that's kind of the trend that we're seeing. But once again, it's up to you folks to build these great applications, and we're very eager to hear your feedback to see how we can help you do that. So really appreciate your attention and interest in our work. Hopefully we can all find a way to collaborate together and make the industry even bigger and better. Very excited to be helpful. We have lots of team members here to talk with, and generally our community seeks to be very helpful. So I'm thrilled to collaborate and find a way to help build the best possible applications for both your team and our industry. So thank you very much.